I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Hi, thanks for joining me for today's episode. Today I have Kelsey of White Rose Designs. She's an Art Gallery Fabrics Sewcialite right now. So she's an adorable fat quarter bundle that goes with her free pattern. So go check that out. She is a self-proclaimed hexagon queen. She loves English paper piecing. She mixes the concepts of modern quilting and traditional quilting together so that you can bring both worlds together, and just has some really beautiful patterns out there. So go check her out. And while you're doing that, listen to our conversation. Howdy, friends. Thanks for being here. I'm so happy that you are a listener of Not Your Granny's Quilt Show podcast. Did you know that we have a Patreon? If you go to patreon.com/notyourgranny'squiltshow, you can be a patron. For $5 a month, you get a Not Your Granny's Quilt Show logo sticker sent right to your door. So go to patreon.com/notyourgranny'squiltshow today and sign up. Have you stacked up on merch? I know I sure have. If you go to nygqs.printify.me, you can get your hands on some Not Your Granny's Quilt Show merch. There's sweatshirts, t-shirts, mugs, stickers, a tote bag even, and everything is fantastic. I have all of it, and it's all high quality, really comfortable, really great stuff. So go get some merch today. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Kelsey. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm excited to
I'm
get to do this with you.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm excited too. Like, I have talked to a handful of art gallery socialites now. And so this is just exciting because it's like everybody's experience is slightly different. And I'm obsessed with art gallery. Like, if you listen back, probably almost every episode, I mentioned it at least once. So I'm like,
And I think they did a really good job in picking all of us and having a really wide range of modern and traditional. And you can tell in just our bundles and how different they are. So I'm sure you will have 10 very different conversations with all of us. So very, very excited to be a part of that group.
Yeah, it's so cool. But before we get into all of that stuff, like, let's go all the way back and tell us, like, how did you even get into quilting and sewing, and where did that, enter your life?
Well, I think the rarity when it comes to people in their 30s quilting. I started quilting when I was like in elementary school. My mom started, or when I was young, she went and got her undergraduate and her master's all while I was like under the age of 10.
Mm.
And I think she graduated when I was like 8. I only know that because I see pictures of her, getting her master's. And after that, she did have young kids, but she found that she all of a sudden had a bunch of time and decided that she wanted to find a hobby. And so she went to, the craft store like Michael's or whatever, and she took an intro to cross stitching. So she did cross stitching for a while. She decorated cakes for a while. We had fresh baked cakes at our house all the time when I was young, that I thought that was great. But she took an intro to quilting class, and that was the one that really stuck and she really liked. And I thought, well, and she says, it was a good mixture of art and math, which I kind of find ironic because my mom is not a math person at all. And I would tell her that to her face. So okay. But so she took a few classes and she found, back then the patterns were a little bit more simple, and simple in the way that it would tell you need this many squares, this many triangles. And then it would just show you a picture of the finished block. It wouldn't really give you a lot of extra instructions.
Yeah.
And again, this goes to her not being very good at math. She didn't know how to put the pieces together to then get the finished product. So I would lay them out on the ground and I would hand her pieces and she would sew them, and together we would build the blocks.
Oh, wow.
So that's really how I kind of got started. It wasn't till I think I was probably like a sophomore or junior in high school. And by that point, she'd made a few quilts and she had joined a quilt guild. And so I went with her to the Quilt Guild's quilt show, which is the Dallas Quilt Show, which we are both still very involved in to this day. And that was the first time that I saw that, like, all these burgundies and beige fabrics that my mom was sewing with that I thought were kind of ugly.
Mhm. Yeah.
That was not all that there was. That was the first time I walked in, and I remember this booth, and they had Amy Butler fabric, they had
Mm.
Heather Bailey, they had Tula Pink. And I mean, as a 15-year-old seeing, all these bright, bright colors,
Yeah.
this sounds really cliche, and I don't like saying cliche things. But I mean, it was like life altering, because I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I can make these quilts and they can be colors that I like, and I can do different designs than my mom.
Mhm.
And yeah, I walked out with I think I must have been 16, because I had money of my own. And I bought a ton of fabric and
Nice.
went home to start my first quilt for myself. So I say I've
Wow.
been quilting for a long time, but that
Yeah.
first quilt when I was in high school was the first one that I'm like, I still own it. It took me years to finish, but and it's the funkiest colors,
Yeah.
all
Right.
over the place. But yeah, I was hooked ever since then, and sewed all through college. My husband and I have been together since we were in high school. So he knows, that I was quilting when I was in high school. And he knew even when we were in college that I had a sewing machine like stashed in my closet. And when my roommates were at class, I would bring it out and I would sew a little bit, and then I would stash it back away.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I feel like it's just always been a part of my life.
That's so cool. Well, like what 16-year-old is like going to buy their own fabric, It's like that's so fun. I'm with you though. Like because my mom obviously like similar story. She's been sewing her whole life. And so I've always been exposed to fabric and always going to Joann Fabrics and there was cool stuff there, but and I've always loved fabric. But yeah, once I got introduced to quilting cotton and like just that world of fabric design, and Amy Butler again was like one of my very first like eye popping out of my skull moments of like, this is fabric. Like you could buy fabric like this.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I'm with you there. Like her bold prints, and it's not necessarily bold colors per se all the time, but just that very like bold impression of like big prints, huge flowers. Like it's just so fun. But yeah, that's so fun that like you were able to get exposed to that early on to get excited for it, like when you were still young, and then keep that hobby. Like that's really cool.
Yeah. And it's definitely, there have been times where it hasn't been as important. Right when I first got married, I didn't have a lot of space for it, and it was kind of tucked away.
Mhm.
Um, and I know when I got pregnant with my daughter, I had a whole room dedicated to it.
Yeah.
And that first pregnancy, man, it knocked me out. I basically slept for the first 3 months straight. Um, so there were times where, it's kind of died away,
Mhm.
but every time I go to get my sewing machine back out after those times, it was like this new excitement. And, by that point, obviously there's tons of new fabric out and new
Mhm.
notions, and, your sewing machine can now thread itself. And,
Right.
when, when I was, when I was first starting out, that was not an option. So it's been fun, and definitely something that gives me a lot of creative outlet. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it.
That's yeah, it is one of those like comfort things too. It's like once you know how to sew, you know how to sew forever. Like it's not like it just leaves you. So kind of like can come in and out of your life when when it works for you. It's like I'm the same. I haven't always had the space to do it as we've kind of moved around, and we've lived in this place for I don't know, 6 years now. And I've had sewing space off and on. It's like I would take over the living room and dining room, and then we would need to like not do that anymore. And then I would take over a spot in the upstairs, and then I couldn't do that anymore. It was just like all evolved. And now our youngest just moved out. And so I've been able to take over another space in the house again. And it's like I always can sew at my mom's because that's where we run our business. But like being able to sew at home is just so different than having to go somewhere else to do it.
Yeah. And for a long time, I didn't have a space. So
Mhm.
my mom and we would go probably 3 or 4 times a year. We'd go on quilting retreats.
Mhm.
I mean, I would get all my stuff out. I would prep because I knew that was like some of my only time to sew all year long. And I mean, I would crank out 3 or 4 quilt tops like in a 3-day quilt retreat
Yeah.
weekend. When my mom and I would sew together, it's funny that we started off by me putting pieces together and handing them to her to sew.
Yeah.
And then I would like iron them because that's what we do now. She was here like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Um, and we finished like 5 or 6 quilts in the week that she was here. Cause yeah, we just tag team it and we know how to, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that like a
Yeah.
sports reference, like one of us plays defense and one plays offense, and we know we know how to work together.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we that's still something we enjoy doing is like working on the same quilt together. I'll iron and cut and I'll hand her pieces to sew
Mhm.
and we'll just we'll get it done. So yeah, that's retreats used to be a big thing that we would go on all the time. And we made tons of quilting friends. Obviously they were always so impressed that I was so young.
Yeah.
And they just thought that was so great. Oh, you do this with your mom. This is
Mhm.
so wonderful. I wish my daughter would sew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mom and I get that too. Like, oh, it must be so fun to work with your mom or work with your daughter. And we're like, yeah, it's really cool. Like, oh I couldn't ever get my daughter to sew. I'm like, it didn't take her. I was like, it took my best friends dragging me into it to get me to start sewing. And they're like, oh, what? My mom's like, yeah. She's like not impressed by that, but no, it's super funny. But anyway, it is kind of a unique thing. Like, not always do your kids follow in your footsteps with your hobbies or, the things that you love to do. They might do a twist on it or something, but when you can do something and work in tandem like that, like that's really cool. Like my friends and I, when we quilt, if somebody is like done with whatever they're doing or didn't really necessarily have anything to work on, they'll be you know, the ironer and the grabber of the things. And, it's just like we kind of work together that way, which is fun sometimes. So it's fun when you can find that flow and just like get something done so fast.
Yeah, that's what she came down a few weeks ago because I am notorious for starting multiple projects, even if I have other projects sitting there that I should work on.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I overwhelmed myself. And so she helped me just finish up a lot of projects that were like 85% done, but
Right.
needed, all the blocks are done. They just need to be sewn into the quilt top. And I
Hmm.
just couldn't do it on my own. But as soon as she got here, we cranked a bunch of stuff out. So
Yeah.
cleaned up my room, which was really nice.
That's so nice. And that overwhelm is so real because it's like, it doesn't seem like that high stakes when you're just like, oh, it's a crafty project, but I will hit a wall and I'm the same. I just can't do anything. I'm like, I don't know what the heck. And I think just with overwhelm in general, it's so nice to just have someone you can call in to like help you out. Just like help me get out of this thing I started. Like I know it's my fault, but like I need help
Yeah.
getting out, you know?
That was my fault. I did this to myself.
Yeah. Like I'm 100% to blame, but I still need help. Like,
Well, and that's
but
why, the whole art gallery. I mean, I love being an art gallery socialite, and it's great because you get, whatever fabric you want. But
yeah.
that also means that like my creativeness is just constantly going.
Hmm.
Well, my creativeness is moving a little bit faster than what my sewing machine or my hands can. So yeah, she had to come down and just, okay, what is this fabric? What project is this for? And let's put it, in a project bin or get it cut.
Hmm.
Um, just so I could look around my room and say, okay, this is what I'm going to work on next. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just piles of fabric everywhere. So it's been a blessing and a curse because I just have so many ideas and there's so many beautiful fabrics to work with that I overwhelmed myself. Like you said, I got myself into this situation.
Yeah. It's like it can happen fast too. You just look around, you're like, I am in a pickle.
Yeah.
And like you're like, I don't even know what happened. Just turned around and it was like everything was just everywhere.
Yeah. It's just piles of fabric all over the place.
Yeah. It's it happens more often than I like to admit, but and my mom does it too. It's crazy. Like I'll go downstairs for something and I'll come back up into the studio and she's got like just piles of fabric all over the room. She's like, I opened this bin and I shouldn't have. And I'm like, oh my, okay.
That's what my mom just moved to a new house. And my mom lives by herself and she's a long armor and obviously been
Okay.
quilting for, 20 years at this point. So
Yeah.
both of us have a very extensive stash. and she gets all of the quilts. So any quilt top that I make
Mhm.
go to her. So when she moved,
Mhm.
she had like an extra closet, and she was like, I'm going to hang up all the quilt tops in here with their backs so that I can start working on them. Well, we filled up the closet like really quickly. Um, and it stressed her out, right? Because there were just so many quilts in there that we hadn't finished. So she actually, when she came down, she brought quilt tops with her, and
Mhm.
we dropped them off at a Long Armor here in Corpus, where I live.
Mhm.
And when we went to go pick them up, of course, she was really excited to have them finished. But she even said, she goes, this is the first time I've ever picked up quilts from anyone. I've never overwhelmed myself like this.
Yeah.
And we took 6 of her quilt tops. So it wasn't even like a few, we took 6.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Wow.
very, very easy to get yourself overwhelmed, especially when you're, you know, I think
Yeah.
social media also plays into it. You see all these new quilt patterns that are being released
Mhm.
all the time. And even
Mhm.
as a quilt pattern designer, sometimes there are patterns that I'm like, that looks awesome. I
Yeah.
need to make that now. I'm gonna go buy get fabric and make
Yeah.
that. And of course, then all my other projects get pushed to the side.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see a quilt pattern and you're just like, I have to make that. I need that in my life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like one thing that's been coming up is like as pattern designers, it can almost feel like it's, the market is saturated. But if even, you're designing patterns, but you're still seeing stuff pop up that you would love to make, it's like, okay, there's plenty of room then. If, it's like there's a lot of people and a lot of designs and a lot of ideas. And I think, you know, maybe I don't know, I think it just spreads the love more too, because there isn't only 5 pattern designers and that are taking it, their share of the market, and then that's it. It's like, no, everybody can have a piece of this pie, and
Absolutely. Well,
or
and I
anybody
think
that wants
too,
to, I guess.
yeah, and I think too, a lot of times I think of it as like there are certain people who aren't quilters
Mhm,
who are going to see that quilt that makes them want to try it out,
mhm.
and try quilting. And if it's my pattern, of course, I'm ecstatic. But if it's another person's pattern, then that's great too. You brought a quilter in and you inspired them to get started. And who
Yeah,
knows how many quilts they're going to make after that first one. So I
yeah,
think, like you said, there's room for everyone.
mhm,
Um, my style is very different, than the next designers. So as long as you're putting beautiful art out into the world, I think there's room for everyone.
yeah, I agree. And, or if people don't wanna make it themselves and they hire someone like me to make it for them, and I'm totally happy to do it because it gets me out of my comfort zone as far as, like, what I would like, pick for myself to make,
Mhm.
which has been such a cool aspect of, like, having my business the way it is, like, making quilts and long arming. It's like we're like a one-stop shop for people. So it's like, I really want this quilt. And I'm like, great, it's going to be this much approximately. And then they're like, okay, thank you. And I make it. And it's like so cool because then I'm like, I never would have made that quilt. But now I've got that experience under my belt.
Yeah.
And for people to, yeah, jump in and try, they're like, okay, I can sew. Like if they've hemmed a curtain ever, or like
Yeah.
even a pair of pants or something, it's like you can sew a straight line, you can quilt. Like I can't sew a straight line and I can still quilt, so it's fine.
Even if you can't sew a straight line. That's what my mom and I, because she just moved, we were going back through a lot of her old boxes,
Mhm.
and we pulled out this box that she had. And I think she just keeps it to like, make herself humble. But it was like the very first blocks that she ever did. And she was horrible at a 1/4 inch seam. And like one
Mhm.
of them, it started off like 1/8 of an inch. And by the end, it was a 1/2 inch seam. And I mean, we just laughed and laughed at like, well, you can always start somewhere, you can always learn. There's,
Yeah.
back then there wasn't really YouTube, lots of YouTube videos to watch where now there is. But yeah, even if you can't sew a straight line, you can make a quilt.
Yeah,
Improv
exactly.
quilt, we'll call it that.
It's a wonky block.
There you go, wonky star.
Yeah. I always, like, crack up at my early quilts because like, there's seams popping open everywhere because I was, like, getting so close to the edge, like, not even 1/8 of an inch, like, just right on the edges because I was like, "I don't wanna waste any fabric," and, like, you know what I mean? Um but now it's like I have spots that have to be hand sewn together and like or patched over, and it's fine because it's like they're just for me. It's not like I made that for a client and cost them hundreds of dollars for something that's now falling apart. But it is funny how like that skill alone, just like having a good seam allowance is so crucial. And, it's going to take trial and error, but you eventually get there and then it's fine. You don't even have to think about it anymore. But
Well, and so I have a 5-year-old, she's about to be 6. And for Christmas, she asked for a sewing machine because she sees my mom, she calls Yaya. So she sees her Yaya and she sees her mom sew. And so that's what she wanted to learn to sew. And so I got her, just a little starter machine. And, being somebody who's been quilting for so long, and I don't teach, very, very beginner quilters. Usually the things I teach are a little bit more advanced. It's been quite humbling.
yeah, right.
Not only as a mom, but also just to explain like this, she doesn't understand fractions. So even just saying a 1/4 inch seam, she's like, well, I don't know what that means.
She's
I'm like,
what?
okay, it's just the distance between the needle and the edge of your foot. And showing her, you have to be consistent. And then she asks, well, why? Like, well,
yeah.
because then when we sew these together, your points won't match. And she's like, well, is it going to make my quilt bad? And of course I'm like, well, no, because I want her to be excited. So it's been super interesting to try and like dumb it down to a 5-year-old's level of why are these important? And in the end, it's like, well, actually it's not. If you just want to sew and we'll put it together, and you'll be proud of what it is in the end. So yeah, it's been very humbling, very big learning experience. If I thought I could be a kindergarten teacher, I am for sure 100% sure that I could not at this point, just with this one encounter.
Yeah. And that's like that age is like they ask a lot of questions and it's a lot of why. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, yeah. Yeah. My niece, she's 10 now, but like kind of around when she was about 8 is when she started kind of getting interested, like more curious about what my mom and I were doing. And she'd always want us to make her stuff, but I think she was nervous around the machine, but just this like last fall, she had started showing a lot more interest in actually sewing herself. And I was working on a client quilt and I was like in a rush trying to get it finished up, and which was silly because it got abandoned by the person. So it's fine. But anyway, she was like, well, can I sew some of this? And I was like, yeah. So I started sitting down with her and showing her how to like line up the seams. And she's like, well, how come you have to do that? And so I showed her, I was like, well, this is what would happen. This is what it would look like if we didn't. And so I just kind of set it all wonky. And this is what it's supposed to look like, based on the pattern. And since someone's paying for this, like we need to make sure we do it right. And she was like, oh, okay. And, same thing. It's like, you just have to take the time to explain the why. And I think the more they understand, or like the more you explain that why, like the more buy-in they can have. Cause they're like, I don't know. I mean, I was a teacher, so like I have more of a background of like explaining these things to children, but it is still hard because you're like, right, I have to stop and tell you these things. I can't just like go. Like just sew it. It's like, no,
Yeah.
that's not how it works at that age. Like they have to know why they're doing what they're doing. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well,
honestly,
you can't see the finished product.
yeah.
Because we're just putting squares together, right? So she doesn't know what it's going to look like in the end. So it doesn't mean anything when I say the points aren't going to match. That doesn't mean anything to the 5-year-old. She just wants to sew the fabric together. I thought the funniest thing is she was sewing and she picked out all these bright colors that she really loves. And I said, when you're done, Yaya can quilt your quilt because she's a long armor. And she said, oh, good. And I'm going to give this to Daddy. And I was like, what? Like, so like, why? He's like, well, it has green in it and he really loves green. And of course I was like, okay, that's fine. I shouldn't be offended that your first quilt you don't want to give to your mother.
Right. She's like, you can make your own.
You have plenty of quilts, Mom. We're going to give this to Dad.
Oh,
yeah. So, I mean, they're
so
like
funny.
friends, so it makes sense that it would go to my husband, but
yeah. You're like, it's fine, I guess. I'll just be over here. hoping.
Yeah. Just
That's
helping just ironing and, cutting all your fabric, and we're gonna quilt it for you and we'll give it to your dad.
that's really precious though. I love that. So cute. Because usually, crafty things, kids are like, I'm gonna give this to my mom, like immediately. So the fact that she was like, I'm gonna give it to my dad is kind of funny.
Yeah. She's like, Dad is gonna love this. Yes, he is. I'm sure he is.
That's so funny. I love it. And it's like I love that she's showing interest because I think giving kids the space to just explore different stuff too is like so fun because maybe they find interest in what you're doing, but maybe they don't. But like making the space for them to do whatever feels good to them is fun.
Yeah.
But it's like even more exciting when it's the thing you do because you're like, oh, I know everything about this.
Well, and she wants to grow up to be an artist, which
Mhm.
I love. And I think, you and I had mentioned before we started talking was just trying to break those norms of like what our grandparents and our parents did.
Yeah.
Um, and so I always think like, I wonder what my dad would say if I was 5 and had told him I wanted to be an artist because he's an engineer.
Mhm.
Um, like what would he have said? You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Not that
Yeah.
he would have said something bad, but when I was young, it was I got a degree in science,
Mm,
and biological science because I thought, that's where you go make money. And that was the
right.
point of going to college. And so now when she says I want to be an artist, I'm like, absolutely. You
Mhm.
want to be an artist? I'm going to support you 100%. you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so just trying to break that norm of like, no, you should be an engineer like your dad, or you should, you know, go to college for science or go be a doctor. Like, if this is what you want to do, I will help you in any way I know how. So yeah, if
Yeah.
you want to make a quilt for your dad and not
Yeah.
your mom, I will totally help you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think we are in such a different space of like, there's different avenues to like do what you want to do or do what you love. You don't always have to go to college necessarily. Like she could be an artist outright just on her own. It's like there's so many more ways to go about doing what you want to do as an individual person. And, I think being women in their mid 30s who own quilting businesses is like one of those things. It's like, look what we did, mom. Like, my mom does it with me, but it's the same thing. It's like I went to college, I got this degree, I got my master's, and I was like, yeah, like now I'm really something. But then to just turn around and be like, I really hate this. Like, I'm really broken right now, and this is not working for me. And leaning into my artistic creative side is like something I never really imagined for myself, but it's available and we were able to do that. So I love that your daughter's just like, yeah, I'm going to be an artist, and that you can feel good about supporting her because you've done something similar where you've taken you know, a hobby passion and turned it into something more. And so I think opening your perspective to more possibilities just means you have that many more options and choices and the freedom to make those different choices. So it's really cool. Love that. So okay, so I was gonna ask like what did you get your degree in if like, but now we know. So that's really cool. Did you work in that field at all or
No, I didn't. Yeah, I went and got a degree in biological science, and I really thought I wanted to go to pharmacy school.
Mhm,
Um, well, obviously, just like every other science degree, I started off as pre-med and
mhm,
figured out really quickly that I didn't want to do that. And I thought I wanted to go to pharmacy school. I went through, you know, 2 semesters of organic chemistry and biochem, and I thought, oh my goodness, I do not hate myself enough to do this for my life. And so when I graduated, but by that point, I was a senior and I'd taken all those classes, and I was like, well, I'm too far along to turn around now.
mm,
And so when I graduated and I could go be a lab tech, I didn't want to do that either.
mhm,
So I was working part-time at Victoria's Secret,
mm,
and I thought, well, I'll move back home and I'll figure out what I want to do. And the store that I was working for, they didn't want to lose me. I was a part-time manager. So they gave me a full-time manager job. And so I worked for Victoria's Secret. for I think 2.5 more years, and moved with them all the way down to Houston. I went to school in Oklahoma, so
Oh,
that's where
okay.
I was living or went to college. And then my husband and I, when we got married, he was living in Houston. So I moved to Houston, and yeah, I worked for, like I said, Victoria's Secret. I worked for Michael Kors for a little bit, and then got a job in the catering sales marketing role. And that's what I still do. I still have a full-time job and
Oh,
do the
wow.
quilting on the side. Most people don't know that. But I do still work full-time. I have been very lucky to find a company that I really enjoy working for. I really love my boss, which is not something that everyone can say.
Right.
I think she's really awesome. And I get to work remotely from home,
Oh, that's so
and
cool.
I have unlimited PTO,
Wow.
which if I want to go on a quilt retreat, I can.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's been really nice. I've been very, very lucky to find this kind of unicorn of a role, that I get to do from home, and then also have my quilting business. And my boss, even, she follows me on Instagram. Um, she's like absolutely amazed with with all the quilts that I make, and that I do all the things that I do. But
Yeah.
it's nice to kind of have like that support, and she understands that it's a creative outlet. It is great for my mental health, because it gives me something outside of work that I didn't always want to just be a mom. I wanted
Mhm.
to still have other things. So I'm a quilter, I'm an employee for them, obviously,
Yeah.
a mom, and I am a yogi, and I'm learning to play tennis. So I wouldn't
Ooh.
really call myself a tennis player. I would say it's a very, very novice tennis player. So yeah, it
Yeah.
gives me a good opportunity to do a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's so cool. Yeah. And how nice that like you could find something that is so fitting for what you want to do and allows for that. Like I've heard more and more companies that are doing the unlimited PTO and I know some people of maybe a more conservative ilk are like, you can't do that. People are going to take advantage. It's like, I mean, maybe, but if the people feel cared for and feel like their responsibilities in their job matter, and then they probably won't feel like they need to take advantage of it or won't feel like they're owed that. You know what I mean? Like, I think people who are treated well in their position normally won't feel that need to take away from the company or whatever. It's like if they're offering it, then they better be willing to pay up. But
well,
I
and I
think
think too, people who think like that, they work for companies that have taken advantage of them, and
exactly.
therefore they feel other people would take advantage of the company.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, they
Yeah.
I I read a study where people who have unlimited PTO, they actually end up taking less PTO than if
Mhm.
you were given your number of days. I always joke that I am not one of those people.
Yeah.
I take full advantage of the unlimited PTO. Um, but yeah, I think it's a mutual respect. The company I work for, like I said, I'm very lucky to work for them. That they respect me and my time. And obviously when I'm, working, I work, and I give them my full dedication. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, you want your company to treat you with respect and to trust you. And
Mhm.
so I trust them too. And if,
Yeah.
I think yeah, if you feel like people are gonna take advantage, it's probably because you are taking advantage of them as an employee.
Yeah. 100%. And I think, like I said, if your people feel cared for and taken care of and their needs are being met and they feel valued, then you won't have to worry. But if you're worried about it, then you probably should be worried about a lot of other things instead of
Yeah.
that. It's like there's other things to deal with there. Like your people are going to treat you how you treat them. And if, like you said, if you're a company who takes advantage of your employees, they're going to look for reasons to take advantage of you because they're going to feel like they're owed that.
Yep.
And it's pretty simple. Like that's easy math.
Yeah.
That maths. And so it's it's just crazy how like such a simple solution can seem so hard for a lot of people. And I think, that translates to everything too. It's like how you show up is how people are probably going to respond to you. So if you show up ready to fight, people are going to fight you because they're going to sense that energy. But if you show up ready to like accept that people are who they are, and that like if you don't assume that people have ill will, then things usually go a lot smoother.
Exactly.
And I think it's that way in the quilty world too. Like I think people, the name of the show is a little off-putting, I think, for some people, but it's like, why does it bother you so much?
Yeah.
And I think it can be the same for trying different things, in the quilting world, like, but maybe a different approach that's a little less traditional. It's like there can be a lot of backlash, but it's like if you're assuming that people are trying to ruin it, then of course you're going to treat them that way. But if you just gave us the benefit of the doubt and tried to understand our perspective, things would probably be a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, there's, and this goes back to us talking about, the older generations. There's a lot of people, this is how it should be done in quilting. I call them the quilt police.
Mm-hmm.
And they can obviously be very off-putting, but they can also, they can diminish someone's creativity, whether that's in quilting or in how they run their business.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, being open to new ideas, not
Mm-hmm.
being a quilt police, and
Yeah.
anyone's ideas are welcome, is always a good place to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know there's a very real fear that like the tradition is going to be lost, but I think there's so many people still sticking to those old traditions that it's going to be fine. It's like, and I'm seeing younger and younger people picking up hand quilting and hand piecing. I'm like, you are crazy. That's what machines are for. But I can appreciate like why they would be doing that. And so I don't think we are in any real danger of losing the traditional way, but I think it's important to allow the craft to modernize so that more people can access it and do it in a way that makes sense for their life, because not everybody has time to sit and hand quilt something for months on end when that's just not realistic for a lot of people. So being able to do these like cool patterns in more modern ways that look traditional is like such a cool twist on it, and gives people that ability to make more traditional looking things in a faster pace situation.
Absolutely. Well, and I've noticed, when I first started out, I was a very modern quilter. And I liked Heather Bailey, Amy Butler, Tula Pink. I mean, I still own tons and tons of Tula Pink, which people who follow me now on Instagram with all my pastels would probably find that, kind of startling. I think she's an absolutely amazing artist.
Mhm.
Um, but as I've gotten on, I like to experiment other things, where now I do a lot of the hand piecing, and I do English paper piecing, and I teach people how to English paper piece. I like mixing the traditional with the new. I think,
Mhm.
when you have people that have new ideas, you're just going to bring about even more creativity and designs.
Mhm.
And so I like the blended thing. So we need the very traditional, we need the very modern, and then we need those people in between, which is
Yeah.
where I like to sit, is right in between, and I get to pick and choose from both sides.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think, yeah, if somebody doesn't have, the space or even the budget for a sewing machine, I like that the traditional hand piecing is still there for them.
Mhm.
And, if you are strapped on time and you want to crank out a quilt, we have the modern ones too. So yeah, I think, again, like you said, there's room for everyone.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Which it's like it just doesn't make sense to like exclude anybody or anybody. I mean, I guess if someone's literally trying to sabotage quilting, then yeah, kick them out. But, as
They
long
want me
as,
to set my fabric on fire, I'm really gonna say no to them. But
yeah, maybe not those people. But if someone wants to be in the quilty space and bring what they have to the table, then like it doesn't make sense to not allow it or to try to police it somehow. Like you said, it's like, who are you to tell someone that they can't do this. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
nobody put a badge on your jacket, it's like, it's so silly. But I think too, the more we talk about it, the more we bring it to light, the easier it is for people to go, yeah, I've experienced that. And you know what? I am going to be a little more outspoken for myself to do what I want to do. And, I think emboldening people to approach quilting how they want to do it is just going to be beneficial for the industry as a whole. So,
Yeah, definitely make it more accessible so more people can join. Yeah, if you want to call it a blanket, it's totally up to you.
I'll cringe on the inside and I'll try
Yeah.
not to say anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great, isn't it?
My 3-year-old, she calls them blankets. She
Mm,
names them because there's one that has like flowers on it. It's her flower blanket. She's
mhm.
got her elephant blanket. They're quilts, but we're gonna allow it.
Like when you're 4 though, that's it.
I cut you off.
Then you have to stop calling it a blanket. No, it's funny. And it is. It's like I crochet also, and my husband does it just to annoy me, but if people are like, "What are you knitting?" I'm like, "Nothing, actually." They're like, "Oh, like this is called crocheting." I'm like, I mean, there's a time and place to correct people, but if they're just asking a question, like it's not that big of a deal to just answer them. It's like it's not going to hurt anything to say, "Oh, I'm making a scarf." Like
Yeah.
the end. It's like I don't have to explain that. And I think we live in a zone in society where it's like easy to get caught in that over explanation because we've got this anxiety of being misunderstood, or like, at least I can only speak for myself, but I do sometimes find myself over explaining and I'm like, God damn it, I did it again.
Yes, I am guilty of this, especially, being on social media.
Mhm,
I do a lot of like little tutorials on my stories and reels, and they're fast. You have to get them done right in 30,
mm,
60 seconds.
yeah.
I'm a pretty long-winded person. And I've even had people message me like, get to the point, because I will try and like explain like, this is why you want to do this. And like, if
Mhm,
this happens, you want to do this. If your points don't match, if this, and yeah.
yeah.
Usually I take it, like I just take it and go on. Because I know that I'm very talkative. So I know that I can over explain something, but I want to make sure people know. And
Mhm,
usually I tell them I'm not for you. If you
yeah.
don't want the deep dive on why this starch is better than this starch, I
Yeah.
am not the person for you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely long-winded. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I'm the same. And like, there's times where I'm like, God, I should have. And like I was telling you, like if when I'm editing, I usually cut myself out of the episodes more than anything because I'll just ramble and be like, what was I even talking about? But I think I just get in my head because I've been told my whole life, like, oh, you talk so much. Like I used to get in trouble at school for talking. My parents would be like, oh my God, stop talking. And my husband will sometimes be like, I don't know what you're talking about anymore. I zoned out like 5 minutes ago. And I'm like, cool. So I can be pretty self-conscious about it, but I don't know. Like I'm like you. It's like I want to know the details. Like sometimes I want the quick and dirty because I just need to see how to do something real quick. But if I'm like learning it for the first time, I want to know those details so that I'm like fully prepared to do what I need to do without like running the risk of making those mistakes and then having to find another tutorial that tells me how to fix that mistake. Or, it's like if you can preface certain things to help people avoid those situations, then that's great. Like, and the people that like you will stick with you, and the people who don't will skedoodle on somewhere else, and that's fine. Like, just like we were talking about with pattern writing and, putting them out there, that's the same thing with tutorials or whatever. Like you'll find somebody who speaks to you, and that's great. Go do that.
Yeah, the beauty of social media and the fact that there are so many, pattern designers and quilters out there, whether it's Instagram or YouTube, or I'm
Mhm.
sure there's quilters on Facebook. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But you can find somebody that'll teach you that fits your style the way
Mhm.
you want to be taught. So
Yeah. There are lots of quilters on Facebook, just so you know. And um I'm in a couple of different like long arming groups on Facebook, and um just sometimes the way that they answer each other's questions, it's like just answer the question, but also because it's like they don't even address the thing that the person asked, or like they'll be like, oh, this, you're in your picture, this thing is wrong. And it's like, that's not what they're asking you.
Yeah.
Like that has nothing to do with
Attention
anything.
issues.
Yeah, it's like your machine is threaded wrong. It's like they didn't ask you for that. Like they're asking about fabric, not about their machine tension. It's like just silly stuff like that. It's like just stop. Like we unless it's like a grave error that you're like, no, this is so wrong and this is actually like really bad kind of thing. Like nobody needs your correcting. Like just the quilt police, like you don't need to. You don't need to unless it is like legitimately like, oh, your needle's upside down. Like, you know, I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just not, I'm not about critiquing each other. And it's the same thing. It's like it's art, you know? You don't, I mean, I know there's art critics and I know that there's, you know, whatever, but for the sake of just creating, it's like just be proud of that person that they put their themselves into that thing that they just made. And if you can't be, then just don't say anything. It's not for you and that's it. Move along. Like there's plenty more things for you to worry about than what someone did that you don't like. If it doesn't affect your day, then move along. It's so
Always
funny.
giving their opinions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's bonkers out there. I mean, I think the majority though, like I've said before, the majority of the quilting community that I've encountered has been fantastic, and most people are really open and understanding, and that's great. So it's like there are times where it's like, please leave me alone, but most of the time everybody's really good. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say, the one person who told me I talk too much, she is one, of, I've I guess a large following, but she's like one of, 20,000 people, right?
right, right.
Where a ton of other people have said like, oh, I love this, or I'm, if I'm explaining how to put binding or attach binding strips, I have
Mhm.
more people say thank you. I have always struggled with this and you explained it to the point that I needed to. So of course there's going to be those one-offs, and you just, like I said, I try and brush them aside just
Yeah.
because, maybe they're having a bad day.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe they're just having a bad day and they just needed to say something. But yeah, I would agree that the vast majority of people that I have met in person and online are very sweet and supportive, and yeah,
Yeah.
great community.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's the same thing. If you have that mindset of like not assuming that the person means any harm or like that they have ill will towards you, you're just like, oh, like you said, like maybe they're just having a bad day and they weren't necessarily acknowledging it to themselves or whatever. If you can keep that kind of attitude, it makes it easier to handle those kinds of comments, or people who maybe are a little bit spicier than others. But like, but yeah, it is, I love like how much people like quilters rally around each other and support each other and root for each other, because it's like, yeah, we might have very different styles or whatever, but it's like we can all see the value in what each other brings to the community and to the table. And I just love that aspect of it. So it's like a team sport without being a sport. Just as dangerous though.
Yeah, just as dangerous. You could get stitches.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You can cut off a finger. You can, I mean, end up in the hospital. It's crazy. Like
I
these
know
are sharp
some,
tools.
they're very sharp. Have been very lucky, and I'm gonna knock on wood
Me too.
as soon as we start. I have not cut myself with my rotary blade, but I've seen some bad cuts for sure.
Mhm.
I don't know how I've gotten lucky. A sharp blade, and I put a lot of pressure on it.
Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah. I mean, I've had like little, almost like paper cut style, just like if I like brushed my finger against it or something like very lightly, I'm like, oh God, okay. That's enough for me to just be like really careful. But yeah, I've seen people cut themselves so bad and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is sharp. You have to be careful. It's like kitchen knives. Like, you don't just go waving them around or like just leave them out like all willy-nilly. I have like almost sewn through my finger. I just went through like the skin on the very side of my finger, like next to my fingernail. And I was like, okay, okay, okay. Like
I'm gonna be okay.
I've had just enough close calls where like there's blood, but it's like definitely way manageable. And like that's enough. That's all I need. Little scares, but that's all. I don't need anything more catastrophic for me to be like, yes, ma'am, I will be more careful. Okay, thank you very much.
My mom was right. That is sharp. I don't want to do that again.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. So with all that, so when did you like obviously you've been quilting for a long time, but like when did you think, hey, I should start designing quilt patterns? Like when did that come into your purview?
Well, after I had my daughter, I had kind of taken a break from sewing. And when I finally got everything back out, I joined this sew along. It was called Tula Palooza, and it was put on, I think they still do it. But it was their first year. They were huge Tula Pink fans. And so they had you sign up, and every month they set a prompt, and you had to make a quilt in that month with all Tula fabric, which I had lots of. Ironically, I joined this so that I would use up a lot of my Tula. I think I ended with more Tula than I started with, because of course I was like, oh, I need this fabric instead of this one that I have.
Yeah, right.
So they had different prompts. And so like for January, they had a certain block, and you could design a quilt around this block. And it could be any size you wanted. I think it had to be like more than 50 inches square.
Oh, okay.
You could make any layout you wanted. So it could be very traditional, very modern, whatever. So I did that for probably 5 or 6 months. I think I made 6 quilts, and it really kind of got me into this, like, okay, what if I took this block and I offset it and I put different sashing in between? And, I made some quilts that I really, really loved, and there was no pattern to them, no rhyme or reason. I was coming up with my own math.
Yeah.
And I really loved that. And that was in like 2018. So one of the quilts that I designed during that time, I was trying to figure out how to write it. And I should preface this, I am not a tech person at all. You want to know like how DNA synthesizes into proteins, like I could give you that explanation.
Yeah.
But using like PowerPoint, I can't. Like I'm not a tech person. So I had like played around with Word and PowerPoint and watched like a few tutorials. I got this quilt like half written, and I was so frustrated. Like it was just taking forever that I stopped. And then in 2020, we all got shut into our houses. I had just had my second daughter. She's now 3. She's a COVID baby. And we were moving to Corpus Christi. We were living in Houston at the time. We were moving to Corpus Christi, and Elizabeth Chapel of Quilters Candy offered a pattern writing course. And I had met Elizabeth a few years prior. Her and I both attended a Houston Modern Quilt Guild meeting, like at the same time. Ironically, it was her only meeting to ever attend.
Wow.
I attended it, and I didn't attend another one for probably a year and a half.
Wow.
So it was like we both came, we sat in the back of the room, and in talking to her, I found out that she had this, at the time, she had a Quilters Candy box. So every month you got some, I think it was like fabric, some notions, and you got like a cute little treat, like a Rice Krispie treat or brownie or something.
Yeah.
And she had told me that she had never quilted. She'd made like one quilt, and then she started this subscription box, and she was doing 200 subscription box a month. And I was like, holy cow, this woman is like amazing. And I went home to my husband, like, she'd never made a quilt before, and she just started this quilting business, and it, has a bunch of people subscribing. So by the time she offered her course, she had sold the Quilters Candy box. So now she's just Quilters Candy. but it was one of those, as soon as she sent out the email, I was like, I have to take this course.
Yeah.
If there's anyone I want to learn from in business, it's this woman, because she knew nothing about quilting and started a subscription box and like had all these people. So yeah, that was when I learned EQ8, which I'd already had that software, but really had no idea how to use it because, again, not a tech savvy person.
Sure.
And I learned Adobe Illustrator, and I wrote my first pattern while I took her course. And yeah, I've been designing and writing ever since. And that was in 2020. My first pattern came out in January of 21. So it was it just kind of hit like the right time of, I had been furloughed from my job, and then went straight on to maternity leave. And so I had all this extra time. I say extra time, but of course, if anyone has a 3-month-old at this point, it's probably not thinking that you have a lot of extra time. But yeah, I just felt like if I'm not going to do it now, then I'll never do it.
Right.
And I don't know if at the beginning of COVID, there was this woman that I am friends with on Facebook, and I don't even know how I met her or how I'm friends with her. I'm sure we all have people like that on Facebook.
Yeah.
But she sells Mary Kay, and she posted that at that point, we only thought we had to be shut in our houses for like 2 weeks.
Right.
So funny.
Hilarious.
But she posted, she said, if you don't start that business, or you don't take that class, or you don't do that thing that you've been putting off because you don't have time, if you don't get it done in these 2 weeks when you're stuck at home,
right,
it wasn't time, it was lack of willpower. Now, I know that she posted this to get people to sign up for her Mary Kay business, right?
Sure. That's naturally.
I don't wear makeup, so that didn't ever appeal to me. But it was one of those, 3.5 years later, I still remember this single post, because I was like, you're right, girl, that I have no idea how I know you. You're right. I need to take this time. I need to take a course. If I'm not going to do it now, then I'll never do it.
Right.
So it was just kind of like a perfect storm of all these things that I was like, this is what I want to do. I signed up. I had no business license. I think that was the first like call that I had with Elizabeth, was like, well, how do I go about getting a business ID? Like, how do I do that? Which was not what she was helping with, but she did help me. How do I set up a website? How do I do all these things? So yeah, it was, the perfect time. And it's been, again, I don't like to talk in cliches, but man, it's been life altering. All the opportunities just from taking that one course, and obviously working hard, but just from taking that one course, all these extra things that I got to do. And Elizabeth and I are still friends. She was one of the first people when Pat Bravo called me to ask if I wanted to be a socialite. Like, Elizabeth was one of the first people that I called.
Yeah.
And was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I get to do this. Like, somebody come pinch me. This is not real. So yeah, it just her course started it all.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah, I hear nothing but great things about her and her course. And, a lot of people I've talked to have taken it, and they've said the same thing. Like, it changed their trajectory, because it was like they all of a sudden had all these tools to use that made a lot of things that they thought were so hard become more simple and streamline the process. And which I think that's great. Like, I love that she was able to come up with something that is helping so many people, like, feel like they have a place in the quilting community, and especially on the business side of things, and not just be a quilter, but be someone who inspires other quilters. And, she's just passing that along and giving other people that opportunity as well, which is like really great. Like,
yeah. And I love like the people that I've been able to meet who also took the course, like Jessica of Quilted Studios and Liza. Casey didn't take the pattern writing course. She took her business course, but I text with those girls like almost weekly. So it's nice to have other people that I've met through Elizabeth. And so I have like quilty entrepreneur friends, that like we aren't competing against each other. We we talk about business ideas and, whether that's a sew along or an email builder,
Mm-hmm.
sign up thing or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another one, like when Casey got her thing from Riley Blake to be a fabric designer. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she texted all of us. She was like,
Yeah.
I haven't told my husband yet, but I have to tell somebody who is going to appreciate this. So just having, this community that she's built of people that can talk about like the ups and the downs, right? Of running
Mm-hmm.
a small business, whether you're a quilter or not, there's always going to be downs of small business ownership.
Yeah.
Um, I think she's done a good job of just giving people the opportunity to find those friends that you can lean on and just say, I need to rant for just a little, like
Yeah.
I need to blow off some steam. Or I need to have somebody that is in my corner cheering me on. I think she's done a really great job of just building that community.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So with being a socialite, like what, I mean, yeah, did someone bring your attention to it or did you just see them post about it and apply or like
Yeah, so
what?
I just saw their posts and applied. I had been asking, so I had done a few lookbooks with them. So for every
Mhm.
collection that they put out, they have a lookbook. I think when I applied, I had done maybe 5 or 6 different lookbooks.
Mhm.
And I knew in the past, because Elizabeth was one, and then Carolina Moore had been one. They had AGF socialites previously.
Mhm.
Um, Usually only one or two at a time. It wasn't, the fact that they have 10 now is a lot. Um,
Yeah.
they picked a lot of us, but I had been reaching out to them just saying, hey, are you ever going to do this again? Are you ever going to have the socialite program again? Because I already almost exclusively was using Art Gallery Fabrics. I was,
Mhm.
being in their lookbooks. And so it just, when they posted it, I applied. And then it took them quite a while to go through all the applications. I think they said they had like 600 or 700 different people apply.
Holy cow.
Um, and I think I was one of the last ones for them to talk to, because when I talked to Pat, she listed off, all the other girls that were a part of it. So I know there were people that got called, almost immediately.
Mhm.
But it just took them a long time because Pat went through and read every single application and made sure,
Yeah.
uh, and that's why I said at the beginning, I think she did a really good job of finding people that are very modern, some that have improv, some that use the darker colors. I, very much am the pastel, more traditional with the English paper piecing.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I think she did a good job of just finding a really wide range of creators, because they have obviously a very wide range of fabrics that they offer. So it made sense. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I just applied. I even remember, I think that was in like August, September. At
Mhm.
the very end of September, they have Quilt Market in Houston.
Right.
And I had already decided that I was going to go to Quilt Market. I'm also an Arrow sewing cabinet ambassador. And so I
Okay.
really wanted to meet all the Arrow sewing people, because I had, multiple calls with them, and I have this sewing cabinet and stuff. And so I only live about 3 hours from Houston. So I was like, well, I'm going to go. And that way I can meet the Arrow sewing people. And I like going to Houston for the day, go to the
Yeah.
big city. And I met a lot of the art gallery girls, and Walter was there.
Mhm.
And yeah, I even remember asking them at that point, and they were like, we are not sure when we're going to announce it. We had so many applications. So I really thought I wasn't going to get picked,
Oh.
which
Yeah.
would be fine. I would have kept doing the lookbooks and stuff and
Mhm.
partnering with them when I could. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun. The fat quarter bundle, when that showed up, I cried.
Yeah.
For sure, because especially being somebody who's been sewing for so long, like I know how big that is.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was very cool to get to do, and I sew with it still daily.
Yeah. Yeah. How fun too, like to get to be on that side of, the craft of like curating a bundle that people can purchase and make other projects with even, it's like they don't even have to make the thing that you designed for. It's like that it's out there and it's your choices, and finding people that resonate with that is like, it's just such a cool thing that, and I think too, like if you think about if they had 600 to 700 applications and they picked 10, it's like there is a big enough pool of people to have so many socialites now. It's like maybe there wasn't as many to choose from before, but I think like we were saying, people have been emboldened to take the next step and build a business where they feel that they can contribute something to the community. And so there's like a larger pool of people and more ideas being shared. It's kind of goes full oval, like we like to say in our house, instead of full circle, full oval back to the
I
the
like that.
beginning. Our son came up with that at one point. We were like, we're just talking for like over an hour about stuff, and it was just like all random topics, and we ended up coming back to our original topic, and he goes, whoa, that was full oval. We were like, what? Anyway, so it has stuck. But I've just thought like, if there's so many ideas out there and so much representation to be had, that if 10 people is like just a small sample of the amount of people that applied, it just goes to show that like there is such a big range of people and styles and ideas. And I agree with you. Like, I think they did a great job spanning that kind of spectrum of, modern to traditional to colorful to muted to, it's like there's every kind of bundle out there, more urban looking like Ashlands to, the Katie's, it's all solid bright colors, which it looks like a party, it's like just
Yeah.
different.
Which is her, right? I mean, it's all
Exactly.
bright, solid colors. And that's
Yes.
what we have a group message, especially when we were all getting ready to pick our bundles and our
Mhm.
fabrics. When the girls would post like, I think this is what my bundle is, but I'm not sure of like this color. And I remember Taylor of Toad and Sew, she
Mhm.
posted hers, and I was like, it looks like a retro mountain theme. And she was like, well, retro mountain hiker is like the perfect description of me. So I guess I'm
Yeah.
good. So it was really cool to see everyone, their styles come out just in 16 fabrics, right? Whether that's
Right.
solids or prints or both. So yeah, it was fun to see, Victoria of the Midlife Quilter, her and I, there's a lot of fabrics and prints and things that her and I do that are similar.
Mhm.
But even ours are very different.
Yeah.
So even that was cool to see of, she's got a lot of the peaches and the mustard, kind of burnt orange, all the
Mhm.
way to the lighter colors. So yeah, it's been a very fun experience to be a part of. And it was nice to have them so that I wasn't doing it by myself. So again, like that little community of like socialites of, how are you guys handling this? Where what does your free, a lot of us wrote free patterns that go along
Mhm.
with our bundle. So even that of like, well, should my pattern be this big or should it be this big? Like, do you like this idea or this one? Which one do you think fits better with my bundle? Just talking through things like that. It was nice to have, someone to bounce ideas off of. I always joke, my husband is not a crafter
Mhm.
at all. And I would not say that he is a fashionable person. He thinks red pants and a red shirt together, like monochromatic, is a way to dress yourself. So I don't ask, color advice or quilt advice from him ever. So it's nice to have other people who think like I do,
Mhm.
and to be able just to have someone I love him. He's good for other things.
I know, right?
Like if I need the sink fixed, he's a great person to go to, but not
Yeah.
not for quilting at all.
Yeah. Like, don't tell me about colors. You're literally wearing gray on gray. Like,
Yeah.
mm-mm. You wear plaid on plaid. I'm not talking to you.
Yep.
That's so fun. Well, yeah, and like that camaraderie, I think too can help, especially in like probably, well, at least from, the conversations I've had, just the like disbelief that you were chosen and like get to do this really cool thing. It's like keep that like doubt monster at bay and let these other quilters like build you up and encourage each other as you're doing this really cool thing together. And you know, you do have your own little circle, the community now, because you've gone through something really cool together and been there for each other in it to support one another and help your best, ideas shine. And I think that's so fun that like through a palette of fabrics, people can just express who they are. And what's funny about Taylor, you're like retro mountain. She's like, that's me.
Yeah, that's her. I mean, and that bundle fits her perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's even cool to see the people who've purchased the bundles. I know someone purchased, a Secret Garden bundle, which is the name of mine, but they did one of Taylor's patterns. And, her and I
Oh.
are very different. I'm a very traditional. She's got a lot of modern,
Mhm.
a lot of really cool angles and stuff in her patterns. But it was kind of cool to see these two blends, that I would have never picked that pattern for myself.
Right.
And Taylor probably would have never picked my bundle for herself.
Right.
But to see, someone else see that design and think, oh, I'm going to use Secret Garden for that,
Right.
has been really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of collaboration and lots of creativity going on.
Yeah. Well, and that's like why I think too, one of the reasons I say that, there's room for everyone's designs and like that wants to put it out there, because then there's like you put it out, but then there's even more steps to that creativity. Like, yeah, someone taking your bundle and making Taylor's pattern, like you never would have done that. She never would have done that, but now someone's out there doing it. And so it's like it's taken on this whole new journey where it now gets to be interpreted by the people that love it, whatever it is, your bundle or your patterns or, you know. So just the fact that that's like an iteration that happened out in the world, it's like, okay, that means there's more space for this. Like there's
Yeah.
room for everything, because obviously that person had a different idea for both of your ideas. Like, and I love that. Like I love the infinite nature of just like the ideas we come up with. And maybe there's lots of similar things out there, right? Like, but when it's got your own twist on it, or you come up with like a slightly different way to do it, then it's like, okay, you've done something new and now you've like spun that off into its own little fractal of something in the universe. It's like I don't know, it just always leads to something so cool. So
Well, and I think I always have to remind myself, when that doubt monster comes around, or like, well, someone's already designed something similar to this. I must have been like 15 or something when I saw this video that was talking about people who were learning to paint.
mhm,
And, just because Van Gogh went and painted a starry night sky doesn't mean that the starry night sky that you paint isn't good,
right.
and don't
Yeah.
tell someone like, oh, well, the night sky has already been painted, so try doing a sunrise instead. Like you would never tell my 5-year-old who wants to be an artist, I would never tell her, don't try and paint the night sky. Don't try and paint the stars. It's already been done. You can't do it any better than Van Gogh. You wouldn't say that. So why would, you wouldn't want to say that to a quilter either,
Right.
that their idea is not valid or is not worth being made.
Right.
You're going to inspire somebody else, whether you know it or not,
Mhm.
by the quilt or design that you did. And so, yeah, there's room for all of us. And I think it just makes the craft even better, and not, I think all the rules that go along with it is just make it even more traditional and ancient.
Mhm.
um, so if we allow more people to bring their ideas to the table, I think that's going to keep the craft alive and keep
Mhm.
it thriving and growing for years and years to come.
Yeah.
Um, and the really cool thing, about social media is what I found is quilting is very much, an English, European, American, obviously people in Australia. But I have found there's tons of people who now follow me that are from the Middle East or
Mhm.
from India, that are are just now finding quilting because it's not a tradition in their country or in their culture where it is in America.
Yeah.
And so there's even more people bringing new ideas and colors and fabrics and designs into the quilting realm. And it's just going to grow from
Right.
there, which I think is really exciting, to see, what these people who grew up, you know, with a different type of textile, a different type of art, what they can bring to quilting.
Yeah.
My mom and I are part of the Dallas Quilt Guild,
Mhm.
and they have it's a nonprofit. So they give out a lot of money throughout the year to different crafters and things. And one of the things they did a few years ago is they paid for a long arm machine to be at the University of North Texas.
Mm.
And University of North Texas is known for their art program. They have a huge art college, interior design, all sorts of art, different art types.
Mhm.
And so they have a long arm class that's there. And they had these, they didn't have a lot, but they had maybe 5 or 6 students who took a long arm quilting class. And they were mostly fashion background.
Mm.
That was their degree, was like fashion design.
Yeah.
And then at the Dallas Quilt Show, they came and had a special exhibit of just the things that they had designed and made with this long arm machine. And I mean, it was quilted clothing and quilted, pieces of clothes made into quilts.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was things that I would have never come up with. There was one jacket that had this quilted collar that kind of stood up. It looked very Victorian, but I
Ooh.
was like, I would totally wear this. Like,
Yeah.
where do I buy this? And this is the coolest thing. So yeah, just having all these different blends, like I said, these people from, the Middle East that
Yeah.
have a very different type of art, to have them come into the quilting world. I'm so excited to see what they make. Just like if you were to give a long arm machine to a fashion designer, what they come
Yeah.
up with. So yeah, there's no rules. And
Mhm.
I think that just is great for the craft.
Yeah. And I think, learning to sew and learning the why is important, but not so rigid that like it makes you hate it or feel like you can't experiment. Because I think sometimes sticking to those rules too hard can be really intimidating and make people feel like they're going to fail before they even start. And I know I was in that boat. So like it took me until I was in my 30s to even start quilting or wanting to even touch a sewing machine, even though I've been around it my whole life because of my mom. I just was too scared of it to even get there, but, like, it took, you know, my friends forcing me lovingly to do it to actually, like, figure it out, and they weren't, forcing rules down my throat. They were showing me how to cut fabric and all these things, like, that you need to know how to do, but it's the approach that makes the difference, and yeah, it is something that everybody that wants to can do, and you just have to make it accessible, and I love that you're seeing a wider range of followers and people that are getting into the craft because I think it's not as global as I think it's easy to believe coming from the US and having it be everywhere all the time
Yeah.
to think that, oh, yeah, it doesn't make sense that they'd be quilting in the desert. Like,
Yeah.
probably not, and their textiles are very different over there because it serves their culture and their purposes and for their climate too. It's like very different, but that's really exciting though, because it's like, well, what can they come up with that maybe lends more to that could be more, you know, meaningful and relevant to them, but still be in that quilty world. And I don't know, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Absolutely.
How fun. So do you have a new pattern coming out soon and or another one this year or anything that, we can be looking forward to?
Well, the very first pattern I wrote is called Flower Garden.
Mhm.
I am in the process of writing an expanded version. So the largest that it is currently is like a large throw. It's 60 by 60.
Okay.
And it uses 9 fat quarters. But if you make it one size bigger, it
Mhm.
uses 16 fat quarters, which will go along with my bundle.
Mhm.
So that was kind of the reasoning behind it. and I get asked a lot in some of the patterns is, how can I make it a queen size quilt, or how can I make it a king size quilt? Which I've never made a king size quilt. So that one's always a little difficult for me.
Yeah.
But so I'm expanding that original pattern. And then I have a fun block that is coming out soon that I just did a poll on my Instagram to know if people wanted just the block pattern and they could make any size quilt they wanted,
Mhm.
or if they wanted an actual quilt pattern.
Mm.
They're pretty split, but most people wanted just the block pattern and they could customize it to whatever they wanted, which is nice. That's a little bit easier on me than
Yeah.
writing, 4 or 5 different sizes for it. So yeah, and I might have a few things, coming up towards the end of the year, to kind of end out the holiday season. But with the Art Gallery Fabric, Sewcialite, I already am making a lot of quilts, but
Mhm.
I'm more just making them to kind of inspire people and get people excited about learning new techniques.
Yeah.
And really kind of leaning into the teaching aspect. That's what I really love. I have 15 years of quilting knowledge, which is why sometimes I'm just, a fountain of information that you may or may not want. Um, but I really enjoy that. And I really enjoy, like I said earlier with the binding, like showing somebody a really simple way to flip their binding so that it lays flat, and then being like, oh my gosh, this is a lifesaver.
Mhm.
I love that. So really towards the end of the year, just working more on the teaching, and just helping quilters feel more confident in what they're making, is really what I love. So yeah, lots of fabric,
Mm.
lots of quilts being made, but not so much the pattern writing as much. Well, being a socialite and being an ambassador for Arrow Sewing,
Yeah.
working full time and having kids and all that, I really burnt myself out in May. So
Yeah.
this summer I kind of took off, and I just sewed whatever I wanted. I took breaks when I wanted. Um,
Yeah.
I just needed a kind of like that mental break.
Yeah.
I love my quilting business. I love being able to design patterns, but that doesn't mean that sometimes it doesn't, wear on me. And at 2.5 years, I hit my point where I needed to take a little break.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting back to the teaching that I love and just designing something that gets me excited, so other people are excited about it too. I just had to take a step back, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's important to do. It's like your, you know, your followers are going to be there when you are ready to come back. And I think, there is a real fear of like, oh no, if I step away for 5 minutes, like people are going to disappear and they're going to forget about me. But I think, you know, you obviously resonate with a large amount of people and they're not going to leave you just because you take care of you. And most people will understand that. It's like,
Yeah.
not that you even need to explain that. I think sometimes people feel like they have to get on and be like, I'm so sorry I wasn't on here for 1 week. And most people are like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah, they didn't even notice.
right? Like there's so much content, and not to like, not as like a discouraging thing, like you might as well not make any content. But like, for my brain too, I'm like, there's so much content out there. Like, are people even going to see what I'm making in the first place? And not that I make great content because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but just that idea of like, are they going to even notice? Do I need to get on here and be like, oh my gosh, hi guys, I'm so sorry I've been gone for a week. Like, I just, I don't like it when I see it. And so I don't
And other
know.
people have lives. I always have to remind myself, because that is the worry, right? If you've built up a following, that if I do take a step away, are people going to leave me?
Mhm.
And that's just Adam Masri. That's just, he owns
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know who that is,
Right.
that's just him. That's just social media and the lies that they tell you, right?
Right.
Most people don't notice that you're
Yeah.
missing, and they will be there when you get back. So yeah, it was nice to kind of step away and yeah, I don't even think I told people why. I
Mhm.
just was like, well, it's summer, and every once in a while I post a photo, me and the
Yeah.
girls and Dan are at the beach, which
Mhm.
is a normal activity for us. And yeah, I don't even think they noticed,
Yeah.
which was nice. I needed the mental break and just kind of, sit back and reevaluate what I wanted out of my business, what were my goals, and yeah, what I wanted my quilting, how could I make quilting bring me joy again, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, because that's really what resonates with people. And I think sometimes as business owners, we're always like, okay, so and so did this and people seem to really like that. So how can I spin that to make it mine? And how can I take this pattern and reach it farther? When really, if what you're doing is bringing you joy, it
Mhm.
shows and people can see that. And I've had to remind myself of like the times when my business was the most successful, um, or what I view as successful, was when I was doing something I really loved and I
Mhm.
could get people excited about it.
Yeah.
And they came along with me, whether that's a color workshop or, right now, obviously my big thing is English paper piecing, because I sit and hand sew almost every day.
Yeah.
So people can see that. So it doesn't matter if you take a break. If when you come back, what you're putting out, you have joy in it, they'll see that and they'll come back to you. Because
Yeah.
that's, social media can be very draining,
Mhm.
um, and very discouraging a lot of times. Like, why is my house a hot mess? Their walls look perfect. Mine have red marker on them because my 3-year-old decided to, draw a mural. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, those kids look very well behaved. Mine are not. Might
Mhm.
be more genetics than anything, but um, yeah. So a lot of times social media can kind of get you down. So if you're
Mhm.
one of those that puts, you know, happiness and joy out there, people are going to be drawn to you whether you take the break or not,
Yeah.
which is nice to remind ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think too, like when you are being genuine and you are sharing your joy with other people, like, yeah, they're going to be more forgiving with your content. Like they're getting something from you, but I think when it is genuine, it's not like there's no demands there. There's no like, I think people become more relaxed because they're more, yeah, they're just more forgiving. I think when they can tell that your content and what you're putting out is meaningful to you and helps share your joy, and then that's infectious and they're just happy that you're happy. So it is kind of a give and take, but at the same time, there's space for living your life and not constantly being on there. And I think more and more people are coming to that conclusion of like, oh, they don't have to show up every 5 seconds because I'm not on there every 5 seconds either. It's like people are a little more willing to step away from it and go live their experiences and then maybe come back and share some or look at more content, but they're not like living their lives on there. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's good. But well, that's cool. And so your block pattern, is that just something you are just wanting to put out, or is that part of anything like
So it is, I'm actually really excited about it because it took a lot of math. It took a lot of math for me to figure out. But it's basically an 8-pointed star inside of an 8-pointed star. Um,
Whoa.
and I saw this design actually on a book at my church, like in the
Mhm.
middle of my husband laughs at me because we were in the middle of the service and there's a book sitting in the pew and it had this star on it and it was just this design. Um, and I got my phone out and took a picture and I was like, I am determined to figure out how to make this into a quilt block. This is so cool looking. Um, and I did not want it to be foundation paper piece because that's, typically when you have 8-pointed stars, either it's got some crazy angles, diamonds, 60
Mhm.
degree angles that you got to do. Or yeah, it's or foundation paper piece. And I didn't want to, so I sat for a long time and stared at this picture that I had taken, and finally figured out how to do it just with normal, diagonal seams, half square triangles and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so at this point, to test out, I have made probably 9 of these blocks just to make sure all my math works out. And yeah, that's why I was like, I'm so excited. I don't want to wait and write the pattern. I would rather just give people the block
Mm-hmm.
so that they can see how easy it is to make and have this really cool star block. And it's one of those, on Google, you can upload an image and
Mm-hmm.
have them search for something. So this is going to sound really like egocentric when I say this, and I don't mean it to sound that way, but even Google could not find a quilt block that had been made like this.
Oh,
So I was really pumped.
yeah.
Just again, because of all the math that it took to figure out how to make it,
Yeah.
I was like so impressed with myself.
That's amazing.
So that's why I figured, well, if I just put it out as a block pattern, people can make a quilt as big or as little as they want. And then they can have this really awesome block that is relatively new. And then maybe down the road, I'll actually write a full quilt, with all the fabric requirements and measurements and things like that.
Sure.
So yeah, that's kind of how it came about. I saw the book in my church and decided that I needed to make a quilt block out of it, because that's what everyone's doing, right? In the middle of service, you're supposed to be listening to the sermon. Instead, I'm thinking about quilt blocks on a book, on my phone, not paying attention at all.
It's divine inspiration. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll call it that, divine inspiration. It was meant to be.
Yeah.
So.
That's fantastic. And how exciting. Because I think too, like, if you have been quilting for a while, you can figure out how to multiply the fabric requirements to make multiple blocks, and you can kind of fudge things here and there to like maybe not use as much fabric as you would need to make 9 full blocks or whatever. You can use scraps from other bits or whatever, but and just that you can take a block and make a quilt from it. You don't have to have the full pattern to accomplish that either. So I think that leaves it in the quilter's hands again to like make it theirs and do something unique with it. And and good for you for like being the one to make this pattern a thing that exists in the quiltiverse now, instead of just on a book in a church. Like now people can bring that to life in different ways and let it live on in different ways. So that's awesome.
Well, and I think if you just do a block, it also lends people to use their scraps
Mm-hmm.
and make it really scrappy. Or if you want to make a two-tone and just make a ton of the block, two-tone way. Or if you want to put sashing in it and make it super traditional, or put it all together. So yeah, I'm really excited just to see. That's probably the thing I love the most about designing and writing quilt patterns, is watching what other people see and what they then go create, the fabrics that they choose, the colors they choose. I have a few patterns that kind of like stained glass looking.
Yes.
That's what everyone tells me, is that it looks like stained glass. I based those patterns off of like black work embroidery patterns. So so I don't see stained glass.
Okay.
That's what everyone else sees. And even those, like to see where people put fabrics, whether they do, a white as the outline or some other neutral or pattern print in the outline. That's been the coolest thing of being a designer, is watching what other people do and the colors that they see and how they will kind of play off the pattern I wrote. And sometimes they modify it to fit what they need. And that's awesome, because I think everyone's creativity and what they see is so cool. So I would say I'm excited to see. Let me just give you a block and you run with it, and let's see what we can design out of that.
Yeah, that's so fun. And I would be like giddy with anticipation to see what people could come up with, because you're sharing a jumping off point for people, where they can really express themselves through it, and with their choices and their design elements that they add to it. It's like then it takes on its own, a whole different personality and a life of its own in that way. And then when you get long arming involved, that's a whole different aspect of it. Like that's where a quilt gets a whole new personality. It's like as a long armor too, and I'm sure your mom can attest to this. Like it's just so fun to see, like, because obviously quilt tops, they come in, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so cute. But then once they're quilted, sometimes you're just like, I can't believe I had a hand in this, like how cool it ends up looking, and just like the life it takes on with some really well done quilting and thread
Yes.
choices and all that. So
Yes.
yeah.
It's always interesting when I send her a quilt, especially the stained glass ones. The very first one I did is called Dahlia Blooms,
Mhm.
and she custom quilted it. And so she did all different stitches in different colors. And
Mhm.
yeah, when it came back, I was like, holy cow, I need to hang this on my wall. I can't believe I made this.
Yeah.
Quilting just made it, puff up in certain places, and kind of she did a lot of stippling in the outlining, so it was like kind of matted down in that part.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, just made it a completely different design.
Yeah.
I'm sure the people who followed me on Instagram at that point in time got annoyed of seeing all the close-up pictures, because I was just so floored
Yeah.
that this was my design, and this is my quilt to have.
Yeah. It's so fun. And like, even when I long arm my own quilts, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I made that. Like, it's so funny, but it's crazy just like at all the different stages, like the feelings that come up, or just like the ideas that can come from that even. And it's just such a fun process, like making a quilt start to finish, and being able to have a hand in all of it. And, you know, even if you're not long arming your own, but still choosing the design and the threads and stuff, like, it's like, no, you're still there. Like the long armor puts that there, but it's like it's your choices. It's still your quilt. It's, I think some people have said, it's cheating. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just one more step in the process. And when you're communicating to me what you want, like I'm just doing what you want.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and it's interesting. So when my mom started quilting, so 15, 20 years ago,
Mhm.
and she joined the Dallas Quilt Guild, which, like I said, we're still a part of.
Yeah.
Back then, all of the quilts, or the vast majority of them, were hand quilted, or
Mhm.
they were quilted like on a domestic machine.
Okay.
But at that point, long arming was not a big thing, and so they felt like that was cheating, and that
Mm.
wasn't real quilting. And so the Quilt Guild, again, 20 years ago, they had a different category if your quilt was done by a long armor, because they didn't consider that a master. They have a master and an artisan quilting category. They didn't consider that a master. They wanted you to hand quilt it, or they wanted you to quilt it on your own machine. And like you were the only one who touched that quilt.
Mm.
And it's interesting, as they have, said, okay, fine, long arming is not cheating.
Right. Yeah,
Have this. You can be a master and also have a long arm, because a lot of them do.
Mhm.
Um, and you know, you can use someone else's. For a long time, they thought it had to be an original design. You couldn't use a pattern.
Mm.
Uh, well, then again, they kind of held back on that. Like, okay, you can use someone else's pattern. Um, and now they have it like, oh, if you bought a kit, that doesn't count. We don't want you to put a kit in. But they've had to, step farther and farther back, because the more rules and things that you put on someone who is a quilter, the less likely they are not only to quilt, but also to enter a quilt in a show.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's like,
so
don't tell me how to quilt. Like, don't tell me what I can and can't do. Like, I think in the grand scheme of things, it's like if it fits the theme or fits the category, like who cares?
yeah, yeah. So there's all sorts of things that have come about even within my mom quilting. Yeah, I remember them. And again, I was in high school, middle school, high school at that time, when they said, no, long arming is not quilting.
Mm.
They only wanted the traditional way. But, if you cut off all those people, then you don't have them in the quilt guild. You don't have them, coming to the quilt show, or entering their quilts. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're only hurting yourself by setting up rules like that. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I always, those are the quilt police, the ones that say, well, that's not real quilting. Like,
Right.
well, what does that mean?
Right. Like, how dare you?
Yeah. Betsy Ross sewed a flag. I wouldn't call that a quilt, but you guys are pretty pretty enamored with her as a sewer.
Right.
So yeah, she
Yeah.
couldn't possibly imagine what quilting would be today. So just
Right.
let it all in.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where that openness comes in is like, well, as we make advancements in the craft, then like make new categories. Like there shouldn't only be 2 or 3 categories. Like there's so many different ways that people express themselves through fabric, through quilting, through sewing, like, you know, categorizing people into two, not that that were the only two, but like into 2 zones and being like, that's it, or you can't, you can't participate. You're, like you said, you're cutting off so many people that have something to contribute. And if they want to show off what they've done because they're proud of it, then let them. Like, I don't know. It has never made sense to me to like exclude, I don't know. I think competitions, especially like, judging quilts, like I get why people do it. And I'm totally in support of people who want to participate. Like, I have no qualms with that. I don't think I ever would because it just to me defeats the purpose of what quilting is. Like, we're not here to compete with each other. It's not a game of like who does it best or who's the number one. It's like everybody has something to give and to share. And I don't know. That's my that's a different soapbox for a different day. But yeah, I think it's if we're gonna keep this craft alive, we have to let it evolve with the ways that people want to participate now, not based on the past, because the past is the past and we're here now and we have to look at now and the future and decide what we want it to look like. And if we want it to look like it dies off because it dies with this last generation that knows how to quilt, then that's the hill some people are going to die on. But the
Yeah,
rest of us in the meantime are creating a space where it can be carried on for more and more generations to come. And I think that's what's important. So
absolutely. And I think too, we are in a very special situation. Um, because so many people during COVID,
mhm,
that was when they got introduced to quilting. They all went out and bought sewing machines because they wanted to make masks. And
mhm,
now they have all this fabric. And, as leaders in the quilting community, we need to be open, to not only teaching, but also just to other ideas.
yeah,
Because we have a really great opportunity for those people to continue being quilters and to expand the quilting community as it is,
yeah,
and not to lose those people, right? As we, it's end of 2023. So we're
yeah,
we're out of the pandemic, but we don't want to lose those people that we gained
right,
during that time.
yeah,
It's okay to stay in your house. It's okay.
yeah,
You don't have to go back out into the world. You can stay at home and quilt with us over
yeah,
social.
exactly. You're like, don't leave me. Yeah.
I
No, I
realized
think,
very quickly in 2020 that I was already kind of quarantined from people because when COVID started, I was 7 months pregnant and I have worked from home for 8 years.
mhm.
So working remotely from home was not a new thing for me. Um, it was weird that all of a sudden everyone else worked from home too, and they were complaining about it.
You're like, no,
Um,
this is my jam.
I know this is my jam, and I cook at home, and I don't go out to eat because I have at the time, a 2.5-year-old
Mhm.
that I don't want other people to have to eat their meal around. So, yeah, not a lot changed when COVID started for me. I figured out I was pretty secluded already and really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But now that it's gone back, everyone's gone back to normal,
Mhm.
using air quotes, back to normal. I am still in quarantine in my quilting room, working from home. So
Yeah.
yeah, everyone can stay and we can all quilt and
Mhm.
keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a big adjustment, but I think like you, I'm like, oh, I actually really like being at home, and my husband working from home. Like, but previously his job, like he was a software developer at the time when everything happened, and they weren't allowing remote work because they're like, this is like super top secret stuff. Like you can't, nobody can work from home. But then they had to, and it was like, see, everything's fine. It was like super funny. And now I think, because we both quit our jobs like two years ago, we were both like, bye. And um, but it was just funny because like some teams were like, really need to get back to the office. And a lot of them were like, no, we don't. And so it was just funny to see that happen. But even like with teaching, I think, yeah, completely having to reinvent how I did my job within the span of like a week was insanity. And like, I'm really proud of how our school handled everything. And I think we, for what it was, we did really well, but it was so hard. And they were like, okay, well, you have to come back to work because we can't trust you to get enough work done while you stay at home. And I'm like, who did it? Who was the person? Like, the rest of us were fine, you
Yeah.
know?
Who messed up? Who
But
messed
it's
this up
like,
for us?
you have to be at work, but you have to be in your classroom and by yourself. You can't work with your team. I was like, why? Like, what is the point? Like, that's worse than just being at home. Like, anyway, so I would have stayed home happily for the rest of it if I could have, but they didn't want me to. So they're like, no, you actually have to teach your students. I'm like, oh, they're coming back. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
my husband works at a chemical plant. So he's used to being like around people, in the console, talking to people all day long. So him coming to work from home was really hard.
mm,
And, being 7 months pregnant and in the realm that I am when COVID started, right? My job really kind of lost its importance, which is why I got furloughed eventually.
yeah.
But he thought in the beginning, he was like, what do you do all day? He's like, you just sit in here. He's like, you don't talk to anybody. I'm like, I don't need to talk to anybody. Like,
Yeah.
I enjoy my silence. I don't need to socialize with people. I used to think that I was, because I am so talkative. I
Mhm.
used to think I was an extrovert. I am fully aware that I'm in a very big introvert now, and I enjoy being at home. And
Yeah.
going out into social situations now exhausts me. I probably would have learned that even without COVID, but
Yeah. Right.
it was very difficult for him, being that he is an extrovert and he was used to working in an office every day, and he does a lot of teamwork, collaborating, in
Mhm.
his job. So to get sat at home, he he was not excited. So I did, when he got to go back into work, which was only a few months
Mhm.
into COVID, I was happy to make him a mask.
Yeah.
He was excited to go back to work,
Yeah.
see people, even if it was, from a distance. But I
Yeah.
enjoy, I enjoy my home.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really like, yeah, I just feel so lucky that I had, we already had the quilting business that I could just step into, and that I have the flexibility to make my schedule how I want it. And, I try to stick to like 4 to 5 days with my mom at her house, working from there because that's where the long arm is and that's where like all of our stuff is for conducting business. But, I was like, okay, I need to make time for my podcast. I need to make time for my husband and our kids. Like I still had to like, I think when you're making your own schedule too, like it's a little different than like you have a full-time job. So you just work your job and then you can do this stuff. But it's like, I'm like, oh, I have to make my own schedule now and figure that out. But the flexibility has been so nice. And like I always joke with my husband, I'm like, if we ever have to get real jobs again, like it's gonna suck big time because having a set schedule that is someone else's decision is sounds so yucky right now.
Yeah, and that's it. Now that we don't live in Houston, I don't get offered a lot, but in my real job, my normal job,
Mhm.
I will get recruited, obviously,
Mhm.
by other companies. And as soon as they say that they have a hybrid work environment, or you have to go into the office, 2 days a week or whatever,
Yeah.
it's a hard no. I could not make myself get up and get dressed and look presentable and be in an office for 8 hours a day. Um,
Yeah.
and
You're
yeah,
like,
I feel like if I still lived and had to do something like that, I wouldn't have my quilting business be what it is, right? I
right.
couldn't be a socialite or a brand ambassador for anyone. I wouldn't have the time for that.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, it's definitely nice.
Hmm.
We'll sit in traffic for 30, 45 minutes a day. I know my husband sits for like 45 minutes. So an hour and a half a day.
Yeah.
He is in the car where I'm like, I get to sew all during
Yeah.
that time. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't have anyone breathing down my neck or right next to me, needing me to do something. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
That's
it's-
nice. It's super nice. And when you're getting your work done, you don't have anybody like hovering or micromanaging. You're like, no, I'm doing my job. Like, just leave me alone. And, principals stopping in your room randomly and your kids acting like crazy. Like, oh, that's, I don't miss any of it. People ask me all the time if I miss teaching, and I don't. So I'm like, well, I mean, I got through college and that's cool, but I don't think I want to do that anymore.
yeah.
But it's so nice. Like, I love that you have that, like, you have a great job, you can be at home, you can make your quilting business how you want it, and have that flexibility to do that and be around for your kids too, because I'm sure it's like, you know,
Yeah,
you have
having
to
a 3-year-old and 5-year-old, they definitely they need a lot of attention. So
yeah.
I couldn't be a stay-at-home mom. I admire people who do that so much.
Yeah.
'Cause that is hard. It is hard, hard, hard.
Yeah.
Teachers, uh, like my daughter, she just started kindergarten.
Hmm.
I told her teacher, I said, I will do anything for you. I won't keep her home. I'm gonna send her to you, but anything you need, I will help you with. Because it cannot be easy having 18 5-year-olds, 5 and 6-year-olds in
Yeah.
a class all day.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is nice because I don't think if I had just my quilting business that I would be able to delegate my time very well.
Hmm.
So it is nice that I have, during the day I work and then I have my kid time. And as soon as they go to bed, I come and sew, um, or write or whatever I need to do, for my business. And,
Yeah.
uh, I think too, I wouldn't have stayed with it if I didn't love it.
Hmm.
Like, yes, obviously having a paycheck, is super nice. I'm
Right.
not going to deny having
Right.
the paycheck is nice. Um, but if I didn't also have passion for like what my full-time job was, I wouldn't stick with it.
Yeah.
Uh, so it is nice having these two. One is very, my job is very analytical and marketing focused, and having the quilting on the other side, it lets me use both sides of my brain. So when I go to
Hmm.
bed at night, I am exhausted,
Yeah.
a good exhausted. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's really cool. But yeah, that worked out, and that you are feeling fulfilled from both aspects. I think sometimes people use their hobby to escape what they deal with at their job, but if you can feel, fulfilled and satisfied with that side of your life and with your extracurricular activities, like, that's just a bigger bonus. And so that is really cool that you have that, and you are able to be kind of flexible and around for your kids, and but also have your space and your time at the same time. So it's
yeah.
kind of the best of all the worlds, which is really lucky. Uh, how cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed chatting with you and getting to know you. And I just love meeting new quilters and talking about quilting because it's the thing I love the most. So,
Yep. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I was very surprised you reached out to me, but I was excited to be on a podcast. There's all these things that, like, as a quilter, I have like a quilting bucket list, right? Like I want to make a, a cathedral window quilt, whatever.
Yeah.
But in my business world, I didn't really think about like what I would want to do. So when you reached out and asked if I wanted to be on a podcast, I was like, well, I never thought about it, but yes, now I do. I think I should check this off my list.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I just, like I said, I've been kind of like picking through all the socialites because I'm obsessed with art gallery and I just love hearing everybody's stories, and everybody's designs are so unique and fabric pulls are so unique and different. And so I thought it would just be fun to have these conversations. And so I'm really grateful you were willing to be on and share that with us. And so for those of the listeners who don't know, where can they find you online?
So I am on Instagram at White Rose Designs, and there is an underscore. So it's white_rose designs. Or my website is white-rosedesigns.com. So I'm on both of those.
Perfect. And I will put those links in the show notes so that people can get to them easily. But thanks for sharing. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that you were on today. And I can't wait for people to go check out your designs if they haven't yet and see how beautiful they are, and check out your art gallery socialite bundle and see what you have to offer. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Yep.